When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
Quebec's provincial police, the SQ, made a breakthrough on a cold case, solving a 22-year-old crime when a man was arrested for the killing of student Guylaine Potvin. With fresh new eyes and new technology, many are calling on Montreal's cold case unit to step up and reopen cases long forgotten and unresolved. And also there are calls to create user-friendly websites and use social media for tips in solving these cold cases, something the Sûreté du Québec is doing, but not the SPVM. With more on this, we go to John Allore, an investigative writer and victim advocate. He is the author of the forthcoming book, That Case Is Not Here. It's about a series of unsolved murders in the eastern U.S. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elias. Happy to be here.
So, John, first, I want to start a bit with your story and why you care so much about cold cases. You have a story, and it relates to Quebec and the 1970s and your sister. Tell our listeners why cold cases have become so much part of what you do.
Well, my sister was murdered in Compton, Quebec in 1978, 44 years ago. And it's an unsolved murder within the cold case unit of the Sûreté du Québec. So for this reason, I've taken an interest. I've been an advocate for Teresa's case for, actively for 20 years, and that naturally just kind of rolled over and becoming increasingly curious and interested in other cold cases in Quebec.
So, John, when we look at the state of cold cases, it's not lost on me. We see examples from all over the place. U.S. police forces solving cases from 20, 30 years. We seem to have been, in Canada here and in Quebec, we seem to be a little bit behind that. Do you have any explanation for why Quebec's cold case squads are a little bit behind compared to other police forces?
I think, it's not just the investigative forces that are at fault here. Once an arrest is made, they need to process it through the judicial system, and the laws are different in the two states. I don't know. I think everybody is kind of testing right now, whether a forensics case like Guylaine's is what's going to happen. It's kind of a new frontier, whereas, with things like the Golden State Killer case, which used, reverse genetic detection to solve that. How is that going to translate over? And I think, the SQ is understandably cautious. This frontier of forensics is the current tool. Well, 10 years ago, they tried something quite different with a different tool, with a Mr. Big Sting operation. For the murder of a Gaspé fisherman named James Dubé, and found that to be overturned in court. It was, his ex-wife was a suspect in it and was convicted, but then it was overturned and she walked. So I think the SQ is understandably being very, very cautious and not just wanting to knee-jerk to what is being done south of the United States.
John, let's talk about that the forensics that you brought up and what has changed here. I think maybe not all of our listeners are aware of how forensics and new technology is changing the game on cold cases. Why don't you tell us a little bit more on that?
Well, from what I understand, the big thing is to have a database, and in the United States, access to those databases is obviously there's rules around it, but it's more discretionary, and whereas in Canada it's locked down, and I know particularly in Quebec there's a very stringent process that has to be followed. And just to give you an example, in my own sister's case, there was a piece of evidence that we wanted to test against an offender who might have, been responsible for her murder. And we were told flat by the SQ that given the technology and the process, it would have taken 2.5 years to be able to walk through to make that one-for-one test. Well, in the meantime, I took the evidence to a private lab here in North Carolina where I lived, and I had the test done in 2.5 hours. So that gives you some kind of a basis of some of the red tape that they're up against.
We're with John Allore. He's a writer and victim advocate, author of the forthcoming book, The Case. That case is not here. It's about a series of unsolved murders in the eastern United States. And we're talking about cold cases and how they're handled here in Quebec. So, John, when you talk about that red tape, right? I know it seems like there would be public support, right, to trying to find serial killers, serial rapists, people that have done terrible things, that people would say, okay, in these cases, maybe we should try these things. But I guess there's the other aspect of right to privacy and just the legal aspects of it. Where do you fall on that?
Well, I mean, it's a difficult thing. I want to caution people about it. There is a sense in the wake of this suspect or man being charged, Marc-André Gagnon, for the murder of Guylaine Potvin. There's kind of a sense of almost a bloodlust, and I can tell you, nobody that I know in the arena of victims advocacy feels that way. If you read the statements from Guylaine's family, from Marc-André Gagnon's former wife, who came out in the French press and talked about it, it is fundamentally a case of people saying, we want this person put away who has been a repeat offender because we strongly do not want him to do this to any other woman again. And that's the basis of some of the frustration and the sense of urgency. And I support that. He should be given a trial if and when we come to that. And then everything else that's afforded to an offender, the right to rehabilitate. But if there's even a glimmer that they might, be a recidivist, then they should absolutely not be given the chance to reoffend.
John, in the case of Montreal Police, the SPVM here, do they do a good enough job of trying to get the public's help and support with tips? I mean, it seems to me that cold cases rely a lot on someone from the public submitting a tip. Do we do a good enough job of trying to get the public's help on cold cases?
For the SPVM, I mean, my opinion is no. I think if you spoke to them, they take this approach of, well, we prefer to work in the shadows and not know what people, not let people know what we're doing. But I think the facts speak for themselves. They've had this mandate for a cold case unit for, I think, since 2019, with 5 or 6 officers dedicated to it. I've been in contact over those 3 years with the head of it, who at one time was Francois Petit. But they're not. I mean, I sort of expressed this somewhere else. One of the point of a cold case unit is the tools, that are normally afforded a police agency have been exhausted. So you're almost forced to go at this point to the community and ask for their assistance. So for me, when you say you have a cold case unit and yet you have a website with only the same 4 cases on it for the last 3 years, when they have a portfolio of up to 800 and 1,000 cases, if the public doesn't even know at this point, because the memory is not there, what the cases are, then how can they possibly assist the SPVM with those unsolved cases?
John, before I let you go, I do want to talk about your sister's case, and do you have hope that the police will be able to find out who was responsible for her death?
Well, I think it's only human to have hope. I mean, even when you say things like I've moved on or I've achieved closure, I don't think it's anyone's being totally honest with themselves to always say, can we take one more crack at this? Is there one more bite of the apple? So I think it's human nature to do that. And although right now I've pressed pause on Teresa's case, and you've mentioned I'm working, focusing a little more on the United States where I live. I always keep a toe. And obviously I'm on the phone with you. I'm very much alerted to what's going on in Quebec and take a keen interest in it.
John, we're really appreciative of your time this morning with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That's John Allore, investigative writer, victim advocate. He's the author of the forthcoming book, That Case Is Not Here. It's about a series of unsolved murders in the eastern U.S.